The story of racism does not begin in a laboratory, and it does not begin with evidence. It begins with perception, what people see, and more importantly, how they choose to interpret what they see. A difference in skin tone, the contour of a face, the texture of hair, these are among the most immediate signals the human eye can detect. For early human societies, such differences may have simply marked geography, climate, and ancestry. But over time, something far more dangerous happened. These visible differences were assigned meaning. That meaning hardened into belief, and belief, when repeated and reinforced, transformed into systems. Systems that claimed, without proof, that some human beings were inherently superior to others. Yet, when we step away from assumption and look at the evidence through the lens of genetics, the entire foundation of racial superiority collapses almost instantly. Modern genetic research reveals that all human beings share approximately 99.9% of their DNA. This is not a symbolic statement. It is a measurable biological fact. The remaining 0.1%, the portion that accounts for all observable differences, does not divide humanity into distinct biological races. Instead, it reflects gradual variation, shaped by migration, environment, and adaptation over tens of thousands of years. There is no genetic boundary where one race ends and another begins. There are only gradients, continuous, overlapping changes that defy rigid classification. Skin color is one of the most visible of these variations, and it has often been misused as a marker of hierarchy. In reality, it is a direct response to ultraviolet radiation from the sun. Near the equator, where sunlight is intense, darker skin evolved because it contains higher levels of melanin, which protects the body from harmful radiation and helps preserve essential nutrients such as folate, crucial for reproduction and development. In regions farther from the equator, where sunlight is weaker, lighter skin evolved to allow the body to produce sufficient vitamin D. This is not a story of superiority. It is a story of adaptation, of the human body responding intelligently to its environment in order to survive. The same principle applies to other physical traits. Hair texture, for example, is influenced by temperature and humidity. Tightly curled hair can help regulate heat in hot climates, while straighter hair may be advantageous in colder regions. Facial features, including nose shape, can be influenced by air temperature and humidity, affecting how air is warmed or cooled before entering the lungs. These are functional adaptations, not indicators of intelligence, morality, or value. They are solutions to environmental challenges, not markers of human worth. And yet, if we move beyond what is visible and examine the deeper structure of human variation, we encounter a truth that is even more profound and even more devastating to the concept of racial hierarchy. The greatest genetic diversity on Earth is found within Africa. This is not incidental. It is a direct consequence of human origins. Modern humans evolved in Africa roughly 200,000 to 300,000 years ago. For tens of thousands of years, human populations lived and diversified within that continent. When small groups eventually migrated out of Africa, they carried with them only a subset of this genetic variation. This process, known as a founder effect, means that populations outside of Africa are derived from a limited genetic pool compared to the diversity that still exists within Africa. This leads to a remarkable and often misunderstood reality. Two individuals from Africa can be more genetically different from each other than either is from someone in Europe or Asia. In other words, the genetic differences within so-called racial groups can be greater than the differences between them. This completely undermines the idea that humanity can be cleanly divided into distinct biological races. The categories are not only oversimplified, they are scientifically inaccurate. So, if biology does not support racial superiority, why has the idea persisted for so long? The answer lies in history, power, and human psychology. The modern concept of race did not emerge from careful scientific observation. It was constructed during periods of European expansion, colonization, and the transatlantic slave trade. As empires extended their reach across continents, they encountered diverse populations with different appearances, languages, and cultures. In order to justify systems of exploitation, slavery, land appropriation, forced labor, a narrative was needed. That narrative framed certain groups as inherently inferior, less civilized, or even less human. To give this narrative credibility, pseudoscientific disciplines such as scientific racism began to emerge in the 18th and 19th centuries. Researchers claimed to measure intelligence and worth through skull size, facial angles, and other superficial traits. These methods were deeply flawed, biased, and often manipulated to produce predetermined conclusions. But they were effective, not because they were true, but because they aligned with existing power structures. They provided a false sense of legitimacy to systems that were already in place. Over time, these ideas became embedded not just in institutions, but in culture itself. They were taught in schools, reinforced in laws, reflected in media, and repeated in everyday interactions. This process of repetition led to internalization. Bias became automatic. Assumptions were made without conscious thought. Entire generations grew up within systems that presented inequality as normal, even natural. From a psychological perspective, the human brain is wired to categorize. It simplifies complex information by grouping similar things together. This ability is useful for survival, but it can also lead to overgeneralization and stereotyping. When combined with social conditioning, it can produce deeply ingrained biases that persist even in the absence of evidence. This is how racism can continue to exist, even in a world where the scientific basis for it has been thoroughly dismantled. The consequences of this misunderstanding have been profound. Racism has shaped global history in ways that are both visible and invisible. It has influenced economic systems, political structures, access to education, healthcare, and opportunity. It has determined who is heard and who is ignored, who is valued and who is dismissed. Entire societies have been organized around a false hierarchy, leading to conflict, inequality, and suffering on a massive scale. And yet, when we return to the science, the illusion becomes impossible to sustain. There is no gene for superiority, no biological marker that elevates one group above another. Traits like intelligence are influenced by a complex interaction of genetics, environment, education, and experience, not by race. The variation that does exist within humanity is real, but it does not align with the rigid categories that have been imposed upon it. What we are left with is a powerful realization. Race, as commonly understood, is not a biological truth, but a social construct layered over natural variation. It is a framework created to organize people, not a reflection of how human biology actually works. And because it was created, it can be questioned, it can be challenged, it can be dismantled. This realization does not erase the impact of racism, nor does it immediately undo centuries of inequality. But it does something equally important. It removes the illusion of legitimacy. It exposes the idea of racial superiority for what it truly is. Not a scientific fact, not a natural law, but a human invention. And perhaps this is the most important point of all. The greatest error was not simply believing that differences exist. Differences do exist, and they always will. The error was assigning those differences a value they never had. It was confusing adaptation with hierarchy, variation with division, appearance with essence. In the end, the story of racism is not a story about biology. It is a story about misunderstanding, about how human beings took the smallest visible differences and built an entire worldview around them. A worldview that science does not support, history has exposed, and humanity continues to grapple with. And when seen clearly, without distortion or bias, the conclusion becomes unavoidable. The idea that one race is superior to another is not just unsupported by evidence. It is one of the most profound and costly misconceptions in the history of the human race. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment. Your engagement helps the channel grow and helps these ideas reach more curious minds just like yours. Let us know on the comment what topics you'd like to see next, because in science, there's always more of this and that to discover. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you soon.